In this lesson, we'll learn how to work with dates on the platform. Dates in databases on the platform are stored according to ISO 8601. That's an international standard for exchanging and communicating date and time information. In Directual, a date is a string where the first 4 characters represent the year. Then, after a hyphen, the next 2 characters represent the month. And again, after a hyphen, we have the date with the T number, or time, which can be specified with or without milliseconds. Specific time zones are added at the end of the expression. In this example, Z stands for Greenwich Mean Time. Strings can only contain the year, month, and date without specifying the time. When that's the case, the time is assumed to be 0 hours and 0 minutes. Great! Now we've figured out how to store and express dates, let's look at how we can customize the format for displaying date-type data. As we see in the application, this data is already displayed like this. Now go to the book structure and configure fields. Here you can configure the format for displaying dates. For example, with or without showing the full name of the month and so on. If we remove the time display format, the time will simply be hidden. You can also select the date locale, English, Russian or Spanish, and set the time zone, which you can set to always being displayed in UTC or Greenwich Mean Time, or you can choose a particular time zone. It's usually better to select UTC if you're dealing with dates without showing a time. Now, save the settings. You can see that the display has already changed on the platform, but not in the app. To update it in the app, you just save the component again. In this case, it's the card component. Now it's displayed correctly, just as we wanted. Don't forget, this is only about the way time data is displayed, because it will always be stored in ISO format. Now let's look at how to use filters to handle data concerning dates. Create a new API endpoint that will get us all the books and show the title, date, and poster. Create a new page with a table for this API endpoint. Add the table and select the new API endpoint. As you see, we have a new page with all books and the dates they were added. Let's go back to the API endpoint and add a filter. Date_added equals date. This is an operator that ignores the time and only checks for the date. In ISO format, we can omit the time and just write the year, month, and date, separated by hyphens. We see that no objects were added on March the 10th. Let's change it to March the 7th. And now we see that there's only one object. Let's change the operator to get, for example, all objects where the date is less than or equal to March the 7th, 2023. And there are several, all added before March the 7th. If you want to lock the filter to the current day, you need to use this expression, today minus 10 days. Make sure that you enable JavaScript execution. This video was recorded on March the 10th, so subtracting 10 days takes us to February the 28th. Subtracting 5 days takes us to March the 5th. So the filter will show objects that were added before March the 5th. Next, let's look at using dates in scenarios. You can use dates in filters for a scenario that runs on schedule or manually for all objects. This way, we only filter out objects that are going to be handled by the scenario. With a similar filter on the API endpoint, select the date of addition, operator, and expression. We can use the same expression, today -1 day, which really means yesterday. But let's choose another operator for more than 5 days ago, or greater than equals today minus 5 days. Save and publish the changes. Then run the scenario for all objects by clicking Other Actions. Push all objects to scenario. Not a single object was handled by the scenario. Let's find out why. We haven't enabled JavaScript handling to execute the expression. In the filter, it must be enabled when using expressions like today or now. Publish and run the scenario again. Now we see that 2 objects did meet the condition. We can check by looking at the logs. One object was added on March the 5th and the other on March the 7th. It all looks good. This is a convenient method for regular data processing. We can set up a regular expression to run the scenario every day or every 3 days and process, for example, customers who have a payment date coming up. Next, let's see how to work with dates in scenarios by using the most common step, the Edit Object step. Let's choose an object, this one for example, which we'll use for our experiments. Now copy its ID to make the testing easier. And let's type the current date into the Date Added field. And don't forget to enable JavaScript processing. Let's test the step by inserting the ID. We see that the current date is March the 10th. If we change it to now, the current time, here it's 12:47, will also be added to the data. But we won't see it, because that's how we configured the field. We can change it to display both time and time zone like this, 12:47 GMT. There are many examples showing how to work with dates in the documentation. You'll find them under the Tips for Dealing with Data section. You can also work with dates following the standard approach for dates in JavaScript. This is the equivalent of now. We can also use a very handy JavaScript library called moment.js. Let's say we want to add 1 day to the current date. We can do that with this obvious and simple expression. All methods in the moment.js library are described in their documentation at momentjs.com. It contains all methods needed to work with dates, time, and time intervals. If there's anything in the library that you don't understand, I recommend asking our community for help. Directual has 2 special functions for working with dates. They can transform a date into a string, or a string into a date. The first function is $d.date.format, where the first argument is the date, and the second argument is how we want to display it. For example, we want to display year, month, day. We can see by testing the expression what the result will be. But if we try to write it to a date, we get an error, because we're trying to write a string to a date. We need a separate string type field if we want to put a formatted date there. Let's add a string type field. OK, now test the step. There's the formatted date. In this case, 69 is the number of days since the start of the year. To get the month's number, we only need to write 1D in the format. Next, the inverse parsing function, $d.date.parse, where the first argument is the formatted date or a string. We can insert the field we just saved, leaving the same format, and we'll get the date in the output. So we save that in the date type field. As we can see, everything is correct. There's a section on date formatting in the platform documentation where you'll learn how to write expressions to format the date in a string and back again. That's it, we're done with dates. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask the community. They're a friendly bunch and always keen to help. Have fun with it, and we'll see you next time.